Picture this. A child sits in a government office clutching a garbage bag containing everything they own in the world. They're hoping, praying that the adults walking through the door are finally going to take them home. Meanwhile, somewhere across town, a loving family has just been told their application for adoption has been denied because their house only has 3 bedrooms instead of 4, or because they're 41 years old instead of 40, or because they make $60,000 a year instead of $65,000. Welcome to America's adoption system, a bureaucratic nightmare where somehow we've made it easier to have a baby than to save one. Section 1, the numbers that will break your heart. Right now, 343,077 children are living in the U.S. foster care system. That's more than the entire population of St. Louis, Missouri. But here's the kicker. Over 36,000 of these kids are legally free for adoption and waiting. They've already had their parental rights terminated. They're ready to go. They just need someone to want them. And yet, every year, about 15,590 kids age out of the system without ever finding a family. That's 43 kids every single day who turn 18 and are basically told, "Good luck, kid, you're on your own now." I know this system intimately because I lived it. For the first 3 years of my life, I was one of those statistics bouncing between foster homes, waiting for someone to choose me. I got lucky. I found my forever home. But too many kids never get that chance. Section 2, the adoption maze, why it's harder than rocket science. Let me paint you a picture of what it takes to adopt a child in America today. First, you need to complete a home study, which sounds simple enough until you realize it's basically the equivalent of applying for a security clearance at the CIA. The home study process can take between 3 to 6 months to complete, and that's if everything goes perfectly. You'll need criminal background checks for every adult in your household, including FBI fingerprint checks. You'll need medical reports to prove everyone in your home is healthy. You'll need financial statements proving you can support a child, not just survive, but thrive. If you're working with a private agency, this home study alone can cost anywhere between $1,000 to $3,000, and that's just the beginning. Private infant adoption typically costs between $25,000 and $60,000. For international adoption, you're looking at $30,000 to $50,000. Now, here's where it gets absolutely bonkers. A 16-year-old can get pregnant, keep that baby, and raise it in a studio apartment on minimum wage, and that's perfectly legal. But if you want to adopt, well, you better have perfect credit, a 4-bedroom house, and enough savings to fund a small startup. The contradiction is so glaring, it's almost comedic if it weren't so bloody tragic. Section 3, the stories that keep me up at night. I have friends who have been through this broken system. One couple I know got laid off during the adoption process. Not fired for cause, laid off due to company downsizing. Suddenly, their 3-year journey to adopt was back at square one. All those home visits, all those background checks, all that paperwork, worthless. They had to start over because their income dropped below some arbitrary threshold. Another friend was told their house wasn't suitable for adoption because they didn't have a separate bedroom for the child. They had a beautiful 3-bedroom home, but the adoption agency decided the child needed their own room from day one. Meanwhile, 65% to 85% of children in foster care have siblings, and 53% to 80% of those siblings are separated because there aren't enough families willing to take multiple children. We're breaking up brothers and sisters because one family doesn't have enough bedrooms, while simultaneously insisting each child needs their own space. The system is so broken, and when I say broken, I mean ridiculous. Section 4, kids in garbage bags. Here's an image that haunts me. Children carrying their entire lives in trash bags. It's not a metaphor, it's literally what happens. When kids get moved from placement to placement, their belongings get stuffed into garbage bags because nobody planned for them to have suitcases. Think about that. We treat their possessions like trash while they're hoping someone, somewhere, will treat them like a treasure. According to Adopt Us Kids, roughly 75% of children in foster care have at least one sibling that is also in care, and more than 65% will be separated at some point. Imagine being a scared 8-year-old ripped away from everything familiar and then being told that you can't even stay with your little sister because it's too difficult to find a family that wants you both. I talked to a former foster child who told me they separated me from my brother when I was 12. I understood why I couldn't live with my mom anymore. She had problems, but nobody could explain why I couldn't be with my brother. He was the only person who knew what our life had been like before. Section 5, the aging out crisis. Now let's talk about what happens to kids who never get chosen. After reaching age 18, 20% of children who were in foster care become instantly homeless. Read that again. 1 in 5 kids becomes homeless the day they turn 18. Only 56% of youth who were in foster care at age 17 were employed part-time or full-time at age 21. For context, that's compared to much higher employment rates for their peers who grew up with families. Less than 3% of foster kids who age out will ever earn a college degree. Here's a stat that'll make your blood boil. The average parent invests just under $50,000 on their young adult children after age 18. Meanwhile, foster kids get a handshake and a good luck on their 18th birthday. Nearly 60% of young men who age out of foster care will be convicted of a crime. 70% of girls who will age out will become pregnant before age 21. And here's the kicker. If aged out foster youth had the same outcomes as youth who didn't age out, U.S. taxpayers would save $4.1 billion. We're literally paying more money to watch these kids fail than it would cost us to help them succeed. Section 6, the speed of bureaucracy. Want to know how slow this system is? The median amount of time children spend in foster care has increased from 13.2 months in 2011 to 17.5 months in 2021. We're moving backwards. Close to 60% of children in foster care spend 2 to 5 years in the system before being adopted. Almost 11% spend 5 or more years waiting. 5 years. That's kindergarten through 4th grade. That's an entire elementary school experience spent waiting for someone to want you. And here's what's really insane. If you want to adopt internationally, the process can take many years, not because you're waiting for a healthy child to become available, but because of all the bureaucratic hurdles. We've created a system where the paperwork takes longer than the childhood. Section 7, requirements that make no sense. Let me walk you through some of the requirements to adopt. You need to have sufficient income to meet your family's needs without difficulty. Sounds reasonable, right? But there's no standardized definition of sufficient. One agency might say you need $75,000 a year. Another might say $45,000 a year. For international adoptions, there might be age cutoffs depending on the country. Some countries won't let you adopt if you're over 45. Others won't let you adopt if the age gap between you and the child is more than 40 years. Meanwhile, plenty of biological parents have kids well into their 40s and 50s. Some criminal charges will prevent you from adopting, while others might not be a barrier if they occurred a long time ago. And here's the thing. A 19-year-old with a DUI from college might be rejected, while someone can have a baby naturally regardless of their past mistakes. The system requires you to be practically perfect, while biological parents just need to be biologically capable. Section 8, the sibling separation tragedy. Let me tell you about 3 sisters, Haley, Dusty, and Annabelle. They entered foster care in 2012 when they were 5, 4, and 2 years old. After 1 week in an emergency foster home, they were separated because their behaviors were too much for one foster home to handle. Think about that for a second. 3 tiny girls who had just been removed from their home, the most traumatic experience of their young lives, were then told they couldn't stay together because they were too much. They wouldn't be reunited for another 2 months, and in total, the girls spent a combined 1,423 days in foster care. They lived almost daily in fear of being moved to different homes again. Imagine being a preschooler and your biggest worry isn't monsters under the bed, it's that you might never see your sister again. The good news, they were eventually adopted together by the Hennebeck family in 2015. But for every success story like theirs, there are countless others where siblings will never see each other again. Section 9, the money trail. Here's something that'll make your head spin. Foster care funding totals 65% of total funds allocated for child welfare purposes, with adoption assistance taking another 22%. Meanwhile, funding for prevention and reunification, the stuff that should keep families together in the first place, gets only 11%. We're spending the vast majority of our money on the back end after families have already been broken apart, and pennies on keeping them together. It's like spending all your money on expensive emergency room visits while ignoring preventative care. Congressional Research Service reports that federal funding for these programs in 2023 was estimated to be $10.6 billion. That's billion with a B. And yet we still have over 36,000 kids waiting for adoption. Section 10, the international perspective. You want to know something fascinating? According to UNICEF, there are an estimated 132 million orphans worldwide who have lost one parent, and 13 million have lost both parents. But here's the catch. The majority of these children live with their surviving parent, grandparent, or other family member. At least 2 million children live in residential care settings, but the actual number is much higher. We have a global crisis of children without families, and yet we've made the process of connecting them with loving families so complicated that many prospective parents just give up. Section 11, the success stories we don't hear enough. Despite all these challenges, there are incredible success stories. In fiscal year 2023, 50,193 children were adopted from foster care. That's 50,000 success stories. Over half of those adoptions were children ages 1 to 5, and most were adopted by their foster parents. But here's what gets me. More often than not, agencies are looking for ways to rule families in rather than rule them out. Most home studies are approved. Most families who want to adopt are good families. So why are we making it so hard? Section 12, the real world impact. Let me give you some context for what aging out really means. In the first 4 years after aging out of foster care, approximately 20% of former foster youth experience homelessness. Nationally, approximately 29% of youth without housing between ages 13 and 25 have spent some time in foster care. 1 out of every 2 foster kids who age out will develop a substance dependency. 25% of children who age out still suffer from the direct effects of PTSD. This isn't just about individual tragedy, though every single one of these statistics represents a human being who deserved better. This is about societal failure on a massive scale. Section 13, the federal tax credit irony. Here's something really rich. The federal government offers an adoption tax credit to help families afford adoption. For 2025, the federal adoption tax credit is $17,280. That sounds great, right? Except the credit is gradually reduced if your modified adjusted gross income is more than $259,190 and completely eliminated if your income is $299,190 or more. So, if you make too much money, you don't get help affording adoption. If you make too little money, you can't afford adoption in the first place. There's this tiny sweet spot where you make just enough to qualify for help, but not so much that you don't need it. It's like the system was designed by someone who's never actually tried to adopt a child. Section 14, the training paradox. Federal regulations require that adoptive parents undergo several hours of training. This makes sense. Parenting kids who have been experienced by trauma requires special skills. But here's what's wild. No training is required to have biological children. You can conceive a child after a few drinks and zero preparation. But you need months of classes to adopt one. I'm not saying people shouldn't prepare for parenthood. I'm saying the inconsistency is mind-boggling. Section 15, the statistics that should shame us. 70% of foster kids regularly say they would like to attend college one day. These kids have dreams, they have ambitions, they want to build better lives for themselves. And yet, only 6% of kids who age out will attend an institution of higher learning, and only 50% of them will graduate. We're crushing the dreams of children who have already been through hell. Kids who want to change their lives, want to break the cycles of trauma, want to contribute to society, and we're letting them down at every turn. Section 16, the placement stability crisis. More than a third of children in foster care experience 3 or more placements each year. 3 or more homes in a single year. Imagine changing schools, bedrooms, families, and rules 3 times in 12 months as a child. Only 55% of children in foster care are placed with families in their own community in some areas. We're not just taking kids from their families. We're taking them from their communities, their schools, their friends, everything that's familiar to them. This isn't stability. This is chaos with a bureaucratic name. Section 17. Most adoptions from foster care are free. Let me repeat that. Free. If you want to adopt from foster care, the biggest barrier isn't money, it's bureaucracy. Most children who are photo listed on adoption websites are eligible for adoption assistance provided by the federal Title IV Adoption Assistance Program. This can include ongoing financial assistance and Medicaid coverage. The kids who need families the most are the ones that cost the least to adopt. The system isn't broken because of money, it's broken because of red tape. Section 18, the real question. Here's the fundamental question that keeps me awake at night. Why can a child be born into poverty, neglect, or abuse with no questions asked, but that same child can't be adopted into a loving home unless the prospective parents pass a battery of tests that would make a Navy SEAL sweat? We've created a system where having a baby requires nothing but biology, while saving a baby requires a PhD in bureaucracy. The call to action. Every day we tolerate this broken system, 43 more kids age out without families. Every day, loving families give up on adoption because the process is too expensive, too slow, or just too invasive. Every day, siblings are separated because we can't find families willing to take more than one child. We know the solutions. Streamline the process, reduce unnecessary barriers, focus on what actually matters for child safety instead of arbitrary requirements. Fund prevention and family preservation. Support families through the adoption process instead of creating more obstacles. The kids sitting in those offices with garbage bags full of their belongings don't need a perfect system. They need a working one. They don't need perfect parents. They need loving ones. I was lucky. I found my family. But luck alone shouldn't determine which kids get homes and which kids age out into homelessness and despair. We can do better. We must do better because every child deserves a family. And every family that wants to love a child should have that chance. The question isn't whether we can fix the system. The question is, what are we waiting for?